Anna Glavinsky on TRE in the afternoon.
We're going to be looking at now is Eva Perón. So she was the first lady, activist, actress, philanthropist, very, very divisive character from Argentina. There've been films written about her, books written about her, but this is through a very slightly different lens. Victoria Haddock has put pen to paper and is diving into the myth and the legend and the reality of this very powerful woman. Good afternoon, Victoria. How are you?
Thank you, Hannah. I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on to speak about Eva.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say, because like I said in that introduction there, you're not the first person to have written something about her. You know, she inspired a lot of people. So what is it that you thought, do you know what, I've got something new to add. I've got something further that I'd like to explore.
Sort of coming from a dress history background, what sort of drew me to her was how her image changes over time, and her use of fashion, which she sort of used as sort of both a sort of defense mechanism as well as to sort of show her rise in status. And that's what sort of drew me to her. And I sort of thought, actually, this is sort of a side to her that not many people have really investigated, sort of looking at her through a sort of fashion and dress history lens.
No, absolutely not. And, you know, she was known for her image and the way that she portrayed herself. Before we go too much into that in detail, could you just give us a bit of a snapshot, I suppose? I mean, it's such a hard thing to do, but, a brief understanding of who she was, what she represented, and things that she achieved, just for people who perhaps were born afterwards, don't know much about her story.
So Evita was born, she was an illegitimate child, and that was something that really sort of haunted her throughout her life, that sort of status of being different and looked down upon. She loved films, she loved the movies, and she really aspired to be an actress. So in her late teens, she moved to Buenos Aires. She became an actress on stage and in films, and then also on the radio. And it was sort of through her radio career that she eventually met Juan Perón, who would become the president, and she, his first lady. And as first lady, she was somebody who very much wanted to make a difference to people and children growing up like she had. She knew what poverty was out there. So she created the Eva Perón Foundation, which was their sort of social aid and welfare sort of network in Argentina. She also helped pass the sort of women's suffrage bill in Argentina. So she did a lot of things in a very short life, because she actually died of cervical cancer at only 33.
Yeah, it's tragically cut short her life. I'm sure we would have seen more things come from her, because she didn't hold back, did she? What do you think drove her ambition? Was it coming from poverty, or was she? I mean, she doesn't strike me as someone who was just sort of holding on to the coattails of her husband. In fact, perhaps would you say that she had anything to do with even pushing him forward?
Yes, I think she did. I think she was the one who sort of could see that as a couple they could make a difference. And through Perón, that was where she could sort of get a little bit of hold on power and then use that to help others. And yeah, her sort of ambition, I think, was very much fueled by her childhood and what she sort of lived through, seeing her mum as a single mother of sort of multiple children, working all day and all night to sort of feed and clothe her family. And I think that really sort of drew on her experiences to what she then did as First Lady.
And do you believe that her ambitions were altruistic in that way? You know, she really was someone who set out to help people, or did she like being in the spotlight as well for her own sake?
I think a bit of both. Like I say, this sort of love of movies and film stars was sort of in her DNA from a child, and there's definitely, I think she enjoyed the limelight, the glamour that sort of came with the role of First Lady. And she is very much a sort of woman of two halves, because you sort of see her all in these Dior gowns at these sort of big sort of events for the country, and then there's the other side of her where she'd be sort of working almost like 16 hours, sort of meeting people, trying to sort out housing problems and social aid. So, yeah, she was very much a woman of two halves.
I mean, you clearly hold her in high regard. How did she use her fashion to make a statement then, at least in your opinion?
So what I sort of came across, which was a bit of a surprise really, is her use of sort of couture fashion, so very expensive fashions, mainly from sort of Parisian designers, that the sort of descamisados, who are the very loyal supporters of Perón, they actually really admired her for wearing these things and just sort of showing what, if you work hard, you can almost aspire to. So that was very surprising for me, because I did wonder how was that viewed by these people who were sort of...
It could almost feel like a let them eat cake type statement, you know. This is yes, I see why you could be surprised by that, because it could almost have the opposite effect.
And for Eva, she herself said that she dressed like that as a way of sort of getting back at the sort of rich oligarchy who had always looked down on her, especially when she first started sort of dating Perón. So the fact she could then match them, if not eclipse them, in the fashions she wore, she sort of used that as a tool, to sort of... but then also to sort of show her supporters, look, you could eventually look like me. You could work hard and be dressed in couture.
And did she ever buy things from the local Argentinian market as well, from designers, or support local markets? Or was she really trying to use herself as a model for those international designers?
When she started out as First Lady, she did use some of the Argentinian sort of fashion houses. And the sort of funny stories there where some of them had to create two collections, one for Evita specifically and one for everybody else, because some people wouldn't buy from that house if they knew they were also dressing Evita. But eventually, especially after her rainbow tour to Europe, she did start to wear more and more European couture, and she can sort of be credited really with bringing Dior's sort of new look over to South America.
Really? Wow. So she was divisive in the fact that some people would actually copy her style in a way, you know, that an influencer would today, or a model, and other people would actively turn their back on design houses that had been supplying her.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and some of them really feared losing clients, so tried to keep it quite secret that they were providing dresses to her.
Wow. So how would she deal with that?
She just didn't care, I think. So sort of those people who'd always, she viewed as looked down upon her, and so for her to sort of be causing those sort of issues, she just ignored it. She didn't care. She was First Lady. Yeah, she was the top lady in Argentina.
And she felt that she could hold her head high. Will she sort of use her fashion as an armour, you know, as a defence mechanism? Or would she use it more sort of as a statement, as an attack?
The last few years of her life, when she became very much sort of, she had the iconic chignon hairstyle, the very, very sleek suits. I think that was definitely her, an armour, and also a way of sort of representing that she was now almost in sort of the business lady phase of her life, where she was working on her charities. She wanted to get stuff done, and she didn't want sort of her sort of very feminine, floaty fashions sort of taking attention away from what she was doing. And I think sort of as the last phase of her life, that is sort of the last sort of transformation really in her image.
And do you think that she would just naturally pick out clothes that sat with where she was at in her life? Or do you think she was actively, when she was picking out her outfits, she was saying, I want to give this message?
Both. She was definitely helped sort of throughout her life by people who advised her on her fashion. And yeah, I think for her to sort of find almost a uniform, especially like say those sort of last years of her life, something that was sort of comfortable, was efficient, worked well, looked smart, sort of looked the part, I think was what she went for.
And would she always be making her own decisions as well? She didn't work with a stylist, or would she get help and advice from stylists?
So she was very close to an Argentinian designer called Paco Jamandra, and he sort of advised her throughout her life. And she also had sort of two stylists with her as well who'd come from Argentinian fashion houses. So they definitely advise, but there are a lot of sort of information out there of her ignoring their advice. And for example, when she was in Spain wearing a huge fur coat in sort of 30-degree plus heat, and they didn't know why, but that was just her wanting to show off that she could now afford a big fur coat, and going back to sort of Spain and the country homeland of her ancestors, sort of being able to, show them where she had got to.
And how much of Evita's sort of myth is created by her and by what she was wearing as well, or how much of it is genuine legacy?
Sort of a mix, really. I think the image of her sort of that Dior-clad ball gowns, very glamorous image, has sort of endured, especially with the musical and the film. But I think the more accurate sort of image of her legacy, of her work and her life, is the Evita in the suit, and the sort of charity work she was undertaking, and also the political career she may have undertaken if she'd lived longer. And it's funny how, sort of looking at especially sort of Argentinian politics, so Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner and her sort of image, and sort of people looking at the similarities sort of to what she's taken possibly from Evita, who is somebody she sort of grew up with. I think her influence is still very much sort of seen today.
And you're talking about today, how much do you think fashion plays an equal role, or lesser or even stronger, since her era in First Ladies or, women of political influence?
I'd say even more so now with sort of the rise of the internet and social media. Sort of what somebody wears can be sort of sent around the world in seconds, especially with sort of diplomatic dressing, which Evita may not have always got correct, and which I think there's a lot more sort of importance for, especially sort of like American first ladies, and even sort of our royal family, that you would wear something that sort of played like diplomatically respects the country maybe you're visiting or is visiting you. There's been definitely, I think, an increase in sort of the attention around what first ladies wear. But even in Evita's day, the sort of press coverage was, especially of her rainbow tour, very much focused more on what she wore than what she said or did.
And I was going to ask you a quick question about your book, but you've just thrown me there with that, less about, saying that would focus more on her fashion, less about what she said and what she did. How do you think she would feel about that? And how do you feel about that? What's your opinion?
It's sad, really, especially on her sort of rainbow tour, that, sort of like Life magazine's coverage was mainly, quite a lot of it, when you read through, is about what she wore, which design she wore, what she was wearing at this event. But the actual sort of context of what she said and why she was visiting these places isn't as much sort of gone into in depth. And I think it's sad, really, that yeah, I think the sort of work she was doing sort of behind the scenes for her sort of foundation and things, we maybe don't know as much about, yet we know what she was wearing.
Do you think that she could have done anything differently to be more credible, changed what she was wearing or gone about things in a different way so that people did actually focus more on what she was saying? Or was she just a victim of the times and the media, and that's just how it is when you're in the limelight?
I think it was just that era of 50s that she was already somebody challenging the norms as to how much power she had as First Lady, which was seen as quite shocking by the rest of the world. But yeah, her clothes were the thing that people could sort of comfortably cover without sort of giving her this attention as almost sort of a woman threatening the status quo, really, as to, yeah, how much power she had alongside her husband.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, as I said, I would ask you about the book. So tell us about it. How does it read? What sort of book is it? Is it full of images?
I've got 40 images in it. But it's it's a biography of her life, but I've just taken the sort of decision to look at her sort of through how she changed, how she transformed throughout her life, and these sort of different stages from sort of childhood to being sort of an aspiring actress, a political mistress, First Lady, and then once she came back from Europe, this sort of First Lady and almost sort of businesswoman, really, until the end of her life.
And now that you've finished writing it, has your view on her changed in any way? Did the process have an impact on you?
Because she is such a controversial figure, I didn't know what to sort of expect at first. But I think what surprised me was the sort of amount of work she was doing sort of just in her own time or at night, like sorting things out for her foundation, going and visiting people in poor neighbourhoods and just trying to sort things out, which, yeah, I wasn't as sort of aware of how much she was there on the ground trying to do things. And I think she was just somebody who needed sort of 100 versions of herself to be everywhere. And yeah, and I think especially being able to go out to Buenos Aires and talk to people and go to the Museo of Eva, which I would highly recommend for anybody who's interested in her, and finding out sort of her legacy, and then especially the legacy of her clothes that so many do still survive, and the sort of power that they still hold, really.
Absolutely. Well, Victoria, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. The book is called The Life of Eva Perón, First Lady, activist, actress and philanthropist. You can find it on Amazon or the Talk Radio Europe bookshop, and it's by Victoria Haddock. Victoria, thank you and bye-bye.
Anna, bye.